Sister excluded my son and me from dinner. You'd have called ahead, her husband mocked. Minutes later, we're enjoying a VIP meal while they were jealous. If I were to summarize my relationship with my sister in one words, I would say this. She's the type of person who will smile sweetly at you before pulling the chair out from under you, causing you to fall and convincing everyone that it was your fault for not sitting properly. My name is Daniel. I'm 40, and I've never been the confrontational kind. I'm the quintessential let-it-go person. The one who picks his battles so carefully that people forget I have any fighting ability at all. But I remember every jab, every backhanded comment, and every time I was admonished not to overreact when I knew I wasn't. My sister Megan is 43 years old, a picture-perfect suburban mom with a white grin, matching Christmas pajamas, and a well-maintained social media presence that looks like a Pottery Barn commercial. But behind it all, she's bright, strategic, and, to be honest, a bit of a jerk when no one is looking. However, family gatherings often bring out her darkest side. Perhaps it simply brings out her true personality. She was the best-behaved child growing up. Straight-A student, head cheerleader and prom queen. You get the idea. I was the quiet younger brother who enjoyed art, didn't care much about athletics, and preferred reading over arguing about who got the front seat. Our parents never mentioned it aloud, but partiality was built into everything. Megan was worried up about school when she got into a small vehicle accident. When I scratched someone's bumper in college, I was reckless and irresponsible. Her faults were forgivable. Mine were character faults. I didn't know how deep those habits were until after Father died. He was the glue, rough around the edges but always kept the peace. Once he was gone, it was as if the thin layer concealing the rot had been peeled off. Suddenly, every supper became a power struggle. Every invitation has restrictions. And just when I thought we were getting along, she'd do something little and petty to remind me where I stood. But I handled it. I've always coped with it. Especially for my son Ethan. Ethan is now 13, and he is everything to me. Smart, humorous, and caring. His mother and I split amicably 6 years ago, and I've had full custody since she moved abroad for business. I never imagined being a single father would come naturally, but it does. Perhaps it's just that he makes it simple to attempt. He's the type of child who will open the door for strangers, say please without prompting, and write thank you notes after birthday celebrations without being nagged. I'm not sure how I got lucky, but I did. Anyway, a few months ago Megan invited us to a great downtown restaurant to celebrate her twin's birthday. Her words, "Nothing too fancy," she texted. "But dress appropriately. They have a dress code." That should have been my first warning. Megan doesn't do anything too extravagant. I knew she chose that place to impress her friends, maybe even to brag a little, but it was for the twins, and Ethan enjoyed hanging out with his cousins, so I agreed. I even went out and purchased him a new button-down and a good dress shirt for myself since I didn't want to show up and be quietly evaluated. Traffic was really heavy on the day of the meal. We arrived barely 6 minutes late, but I apologized as we stepped in. The hostess smiled politely and ushered me to the private dining area. It was completely glass-walled and softly illuminated, with magnificent hanging lamps, servers, and real tuxedo vests. Ethan's eyes widened. "This place is awesome," he muttered, pulling on my sleeve. "Can I order steak?" "Whatever you want, bud." I smiled. We followed the hostess down the hall, and I saw the group immediately away. Megan and her husband John were already sitting at a big table, with their twins and another couple I didn't recognize. For children and adults, there were a total of 9 chairs, although only 4 were occupied. The rest had carefully folded napkins, menus, and little place cards with names. I slowed slightly, puzzled. My name was not on any of the cards. Megan looked up and grinned with that faux surprised expression she'd perfected over the years before I could say anything. "Oh, Daniel," she said, as if she hadn't noticed me walk in. "I thought I told you we only reserved for 9. I hadn't noticed. I didn't know I needed to RSVP. "You said to come." "I did say that," she confirmed, her voice saccharine sweet. "But we had to finalize the guest list for the private room, which has limited seating and will be filled with the twins' friends and their parents," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the table. "There's only room for 4. I looked around. There are no staff members bringing more seats. There is no one making room, just 9 chairs are pre-arranged, similar to a wedding rehearsal supper. Ethan stood awkwardly behind me, peering up with that polite, apprehensive grin that children give when they realize something is wrong but don't want to make a fuss. John reclined back in his chair, sipping from a wine glass. "You really should have called ahead, man." I felt heat rise in my face but swallowed it. "Got it," I said quietly. I could have argued. I could have confronted them right then, but I did not. Something in the air told me it wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a planned message. I smiled firmly, placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, and directed him to the opposite side of the diner. The hostess, bless her heart, observed us wandering and inquired if we needed assistance. I gave her a quick summary and asked casually if there was any open sitting available, preferably private. She paused for a second before smiling and saying, "Let me check with the manager." And this is how I met Steve. Steve, the restaurant manager, was probably in his late 60s. Silver hair, a nice suit, and the type of demeanor that immediately makes you feel like you're speaking with the person in control. His brow wrinkled as I narrated what happened with no bitterness and only facts. "They didn't reserve spots for you and your son, even though you were invited?" "Apparently there's only room for 4, I remarked, using air quotes. Steve gave me a long look and nodded once. "Give me 6 minutes." 12 minutes later, Ethan and I were seated at a gorgeous booth on the opposite side of the restaurant. Plush leather chairs, a fireplace view, and a server who greeted us like we were royalty. I wasn't sure what Steve did behind the scenes, but it was evident that we were taken care of. I maintained my cool. I didn't return to Megan's table. I didn't create a disturbance, but I could see her through the glass barrier. Every time she looked up and saw me smiling, conversing with Steve, or joking with Ethan, her face clenched slightly more. Then came the moment that changed everything. The waiter returned and said, "Mr. Daniel, the manager wanted you to know that everything has been arranged as discussed." He then glanced up at me, perplexed. "What did you arrange?" I simply grinned because that's when I realized this wasn't going to end the way Megan expected. This wouldn't be another scenario in which Daniel silently accepts the blow, makes explanations, and fades into the background. No, this time I had a plan, and by the time dessert arrived, everything would fall into place. Ethan was drinking his lemonade with one of those nice metal straws when I noticed Megan bend over and mumble something to John. He stared at us, then snorted into his wine. One of the twins, James, I believe, craned his neck to gaze across at us before being gently diverted by his mother. The entire affair played out like a pantomime, nuanced enough to allow for plausible deniability while being sharp enough to sting. I did not flinch. Instead, I grinned and waved across the room, as if we were old friends reconnecting from a distance. Steve, the manager, walked by again and observed. "Everything still good here?" he inquired, casting a curious glance at the other table. "Perfect," I said. "Better than expected, honestly." Ethan smiled. "Dad, can I get the steak and mac and cheese?" I said, "Go for it," and nodded. "We're celebrating." He cocked his head. "What are we celebrating?" I simply smiled at him. "That we're not sitting over there." It would have been easy to brush it off, put it up to Megan's personality, and move on, but something had changed. Perhaps it was the way Ethan looked at me, hesitant but trying to be strong. Perhaps it was Megan's apparent ease in throwing her weight around and humiliating me in front of my child. She always understood how to tread that fine line. Just petty enough to make you question your own rage. Just subtle enough that blowing out would make you appear like the issue. But it wasn't just about me anymore. This time, she didn't just shove the chair out from beneath me. She also grabbed it out from beneath my son. And I was not going to let that go. Dinner was great. I led Ethan to order whatever he wanted. Michael, the server, kept our drinks full and our dishes warm. Halfway through our lunch, Steve stopped by again and informed me that if we wanted dessert, he had something special planned. I assured him we'd love it. Megan's table was visible via the reflection in the glass behind Ethan's seat. Their side was active, but she would check over every few minutes, most likely wondering what we were talking about, what we were laughing at, and what I had said to the manager. However, the breaking point did not occur until the cake. Megan had apparently arranged for a large shared dessert to be carried out to her table for the twins, a sparkler-topped volcano of fudge and brownies that kids would go crazy over. The children shouted and yelled when the waiter rolled it out, music blaring and fireworks fizzing. The spectacle focused the whole restaurant's attention on her table. Ethan turned to look and grinned. "That looks cool." "It does," I said. Megan lifted a champagne glass toward us and mouthed, "You missed out." Subtle, refined, and completely annoying. I nodded, not in rage or defeat, but just to acknowledge. But that's when it struck me. This wasn't a casual insult. The entire affair had been arranged. Megan never meant for us to attend the dinner. The exclusive area, the allocated seats, and the spectacle were all orchestrated. It was a statement, a flex. She wanted to show her pals that she was a star. That she could freeze out her own brother while remaining nice about it. That she could omit her family without feeling guilty. Because in her world, looks meant everything. And I knew she was going to attempt to make me appear like the ungrateful one. Steve stopped by again just as they were finished their cake. "Everything still to your liking?" he inquired. "Couldn't be better," I said. "Hey, do you guys do custom desserts for events?" He raised an eyebrow. "We do. Want me to send over a menu?" I paused. Then I leaned in little. "Actually, how hard would it be to make a duplicate of that dessert?" I covertly gestured to Megan's table. "Only bigger." Steve tilted his head. "Bigger?" "Same base but triple it. Make it theatrical. I'll cover it." He offered me a sneaky smile. "I'll see what I can do." With that, the stage was set. I assumed that was the end of it, the small finale. A small flex of mine own, offered with a grin and courteous tone. I did not need to be petty. I didn't need to raise my voice or cause a scene. I simply wanted Megan to feel the way she made us feel. But then something happened that flipped the night upside down. Ethan had excused himself to go use the bathroom, and I was looking through my phone when a shadow moved by our table. I looked up and found John standing there, wine glass in hand, a perpetual sneer on his face. "We didn't expect to see you here," he remarked. I blinked. "You mean after you told me there were no seats for us?" He laughed as if we were telling a joke. "Come on, man. It's not that deep. You know how Megan gets with party planning. She's got that whole guest list system." "It's just numbers, right?" I responded, ignoring the bait. "Just numbers. You could have said something though," he continued, tipping his drink. "Could have asked for a chair or whatever. Nobody was trying to snub you." I gazed at him. "You told me I should have called ahead." John shrugged. "Well, yeah. I mean, if you really wanted to sit with us, you would have made sure, right?" I had to bite my tongue. Ethan returned to the table and paused when he noticed John standing there. "Hi, Uncle John." John gave him a nod. "Hey, kiddo." Then he returned his attention to me and dropped his voice so that only I could hear. "Look, I know you don't always feel included, but it's not personal. Megan just doesn't like chaos. You and Ethan, you're kind of unpredictable." I blinked. "Unpredictable?" He hurried to add, "Not in a bad way. Just, not part of the routine. She works hard to make things nice. Maybe next time just check in before showing up." That term, check in, made me feel like an alien, a visitor who required permission to be with family. I stood slowly. "Thanks for stopping by, John. I think our dessert's about to arrive." He gave me a little shrug, then returned to their table. Megan noticed him and spoke to him as he sat down. He responded with a whisper, and she laughed. And then I felt it. The deep, piercing snap of something finally breaking free. It was not about supper. It was not even about the table. It was about the years of being the forgotten brother, the spare seat that only counted if someone else canceled. I recall the holidays when our gifts were typically last-minute afterthoughts. She neglected to write Ethan's name on the birthday card. She once invited the entire family to her beach house except for us and explained that it was simply a logistical issue. I recalled everything, and for once, I wasn't going to swallow it. The waiter reappeared, wheeling in a trolley so enormous it required 2 staff members to maneuver. On top there was a 3-tiered dessert monstrosity: molten lava cake, brownie towers, ice cream scoops balanced with chocolate shards, caramel dripping, strawberries coated in gold flakes, genuine gold flakes, and a little fondant plaque that said, "To the best dad and the coolest kid." Ethan's eyes almost flew out of his head. The entire restaurant gasped audibly. Phones appeared. Everyone started clapping. The waiter lighted a line of sparklers around the base, creating a scene reminiscent of a Vegas performance. Megan's expression became frozen across the room. Steve returned as if by magic and patted my back. "Enjoy, gentlemen. It's on the house." I blinked. "Wait, what?" He grinned. "Your story kind of stuck with me, and honestly, it's nice seeing someone treat their kid right. Consider it a manager's privilege." I was astonished. Ethan dug in and giggled. Chocolate splattered on his cheek. "Dad, this is awesome." I chuckled, overwhelmed but appreciative. "Yeah, bud, it really is." Megan did not come over after that, but she was under no obligation to. I could see the tightness in her jaw. She grabbed her handbag a bit more tightly, the gradual terror that set in when she realized she was no longer in control of the room. But the big surprise happened when the check arrived. Not mine, hers. Because you see, Megan had no idea, and neither did anyone else at her table, that the restaurant had a policy about large private dining bookings. On Friday nights, groups using the private space must spend a minimum of $3,500. If you do not reach the minimum, they will not cancel the charge. They simply charge you regardless. And someone at that table had just ordered sparkling water and salad, but I didn't point it out. I didn't need to because the manager was already approaching their table, and her expression when she saw the quantity on the bill. Let me just say, the look she gave me from across the room was worth every sparkler. When we left the restaurant that evening, Ethan was still buzzing from the sugar and the attention. He gripped one of the gold-dusted strawberries like a prize, recounting every aspect of the dessert spectacular with the frantic delight that only a 13-year-old could muster. I smiled and nodded as he spoke, but my mind was elsewhere altogether. The rush of adrenaline from Megan's frozen expression, the manager's silent support, and the quiet power of being noticed began to wear off. And now I feel it. That strange hollow feeling in your chest when you finally stand up for yourself. That is a question you do not want to ask. Did I go too far? I didn't speak anything throughout the way home. Ethan slept out halfway through, still babbling about the lava mountain cake. But my mind was racing. Not quite guilty, but rather exhausted. Emotional hangover, perhaps. Standing up to Megan, however, did not solve the problem. It did not rewrite the past. It didn't change the reality that I was still the forgotten sister, the one who was only useful when someone needed a helping hand or a discreet favor. That night was a spark, yes, but I could feel it immediately. It would not affect how the rest of the family perceived me. If anything, it may support their silent misgivings. Daniel is emotional, overreacts, creates a scene, and maybe I overstepped. I have no regrets about treating Ethan to something wonderful, but I worried whether the special dessert, the 3-tiered extravaganza, came across as petty. Was I attempting to give my son a memory, or was I out to get even? That question remained for several weeks. Megan did not follow up after the dinner. No text, no phone call, not even a passive-aggressive group message including a link to birthday images. I didn't anticipate an apology. She'd never apologized for anything in her life, yet the stillness seemed heavy. Intentional. My mother, of course, became engaged in the way that only she could. I heard things got a little awkward at the restaurant, she stated over the phone one afternoon, stretching out the word awkward as if it were thorny. Awkward, I said, attempting to keep my voice cool. She said there was no room. We had to eat separately. Well, she began with a sigh that was deliberate. You have to understand, Megan puts a lot of effort into these events, planning for kids, making sure everything runs smoothly. Maybe you should have communicated better. I closed my eyes. There it is. Mom, I declared. She invited me. She told me the time and place. She didn't say anything about RSVPs or limited seating. I'm just saying, maybe if you'd called ahead. She told me I should have phoned ahead once we arrived. A pause. Well, maybe she was just stressed. Then I heard about an elaborate dessert. I nearly laughed. So now I'm the problem? I didn't say that, she said. But her tone conveyed just that. The conversation came to an end shortly thereafter. There is no resolution or support, it is simply more of the same. I'm tiptoeing around Megan's sentiments and minimizing mine. That was then I noticed something else. Megan's actions did not bring the situation to its lowest point. It was rock bottom because I kept expecting strangers to suddenly understand me. I'd spent the majority of my life shrinking myself to suit their comfort zones, downplaying victories, laughing off slights, and telling myself, that's just how she is. But what was I teaching Ethan if I continued doing that? I didn't want him to grow up believing that love meant condoning rudeness, or that family meant no limits. I wanted him to understand his worth, so I had to start showing him mine. So I stopped waiting for validation. I stopped responding to group conversations that were solely to commemorate Megan's achievements. I did not give gifts for her twins' upcoming occasion. I did not explain myself. I did not defend myself. I just stepped back. In the silence that followed, something unexpected occurred. I started breathing again. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't wasting energy trying to navigate family politics. I wasn't practicing comebacks or repeating disputes in my brain. I had room. And in that space, I began to focus on something I had long neglected. Myself. I had always been artistic, sketching, painting, and creating. But I'd hidden that side for years, trying hard to make Ethan's life solid following the divorce. It paid the bills, yes, but it never satisfied me. One night, after Ethan had gone to bed, I took out my old sketch pad from the back of the closet and began scribbling. It was odd at first, like taking up a language you hadn't spoken in years. Then muscle memory took over. A doodle became a drawing. A single drawing became a full-page illustration. And one night I shared a handful of them anonymously on a Reddit art thread to see what others thought. The reaction stunned me. People enjoyed my work. They absolutely enjoyed it. There were several comments, inquiries, praises, and even a handful of commission requests. I hadn't even considered generating money from it, but now it didn't seem so far-fetched. I began putting in 2 hours every night after Ethan went to bed. Not laboring or hustling, simply creating. I finally felt like myself after years. And Ethan noticed. "You've been in a better mood lately," he commented one morning at breakfast. I blinked. "Really?" "Yeah," he said. "You don't seem tired anymore." I smiled and ruffled his hair. "That's because I've been drawing again." "Cool." He smiled. "Can you teach me?" That moment, that one tiny statement, meant more than Megan's entire apologies. Things took a positive turn from there. I launched an Instagram art page and worked on a few minor projects, including logos, pet pictures, and even a book cover for an indie author. It wasn't a life-changing sum, but it was something. A side income, a secondary identity, and something I owned. Ethan and I started having art evenings every Friday. We'd turn on music, get some munchies, and doodle together. He would occasionally attempt to imitate my manner. Other times he'd perform bizarre, abstract things I'd never thought of. I could see how it boosted his confidence in the same manner that it restored my voice. And with each passing week, the resentment subsided. I didn't need vengeance anymore. I didn't want Megan to be harmed. I simply needed to recover. But of course, relatives will not let you leave peacefully. It began with a birthday invitation. Not Ethan's. Mine. Megan's handwritten card arrived in the mail. "We're doing a little joint birthday dinner for Mom and Daniel. Family only. Dress nice. RSVP." I looked at it for a long time. No call, text or apology. Just a perfectly penned invitation as if nothing had occurred. And the setting. The same restaurant, private room, and Friday night. I nearly threw the card away. But something stopped me because I knew Megan. This was not an olive branch. It was a reset, an attempt to reclaim control, rewrite the story, and reintroduce me into the fold on her terms. But I was no longer the same person. I was not coming back to be silent. And if Megan wanted a supper, she was going to get more than she expected. The invitation lingered on the corner of my desk for 4 days. Not because I was considering whether or not to go. Deep down, I already knew the answer. I was going, but not as the Daniel they were expecting. Not the quiet brother who nodded along while being ignored. Not the doormat who smiled through clenched teeth and attempted to preserve the peace. Daniel was gone. This was more than simply a birthday supper. It was a test. Megan was attempting to regain control. She had picked the eatery. She included me this time, but not warmly. With calculating, she said, "See, I can be generous when I want to be, but only if you play along." Except this time, I didn't show up to play along. I came to make a statement, and I knew just how to do it. The first thing I did was phone the restaurant's manager, Steve. I did not expect him to remember me. It had been more than a month since the twins had dined. But when I announced my name and described the triple-decker dessert, he chuckled. "How could I forget?" he said. "You're the guy who made my pastry chef cry." But in a nice way. Her response was, "That was the most fun she's had plating something in years." I grinned. "Well, I've got a bit of a situation, and I think you might be the only person who can help." He listened as I described the invitation, the setup, and how Megan worked. I kept my tone casual yet honest. I did not want to lie or exaggerate. I only wanted him to understand. He did. "Let me guess," Steve said dryly. "Private room again. Limited seats. Everything perfectly orchestrated." "Exactly," I said. "Let me check the booking." He clicked in the background. "Yep. Friday night. Same table reserved for 12. That's what your mom, Megan, her husband, the twins, you and your son, and probably a +1 or 2. My chest clenched. 12 chairs. Just enough to make it feel like a family gathering, but not enough to invite anybody outside of the immediate circle. Megan had once again declared herself the gatekeeper to admittance. "I want to shake things up," I remarked. "Nothing loud, nothing petty, just something to remind her I'm not playing by her rules anymore." Steve hesitated. "Do you want a separate table again?" "No," I said. "This time, I want a seat at that table." And it was the beginning. Over the next 3 days, I began putting things into action. Step 1. Bring someone she did not anticipate. Megan had always made subtle comments about my social life. At family gatherings, she'd say things like, "Daniel's too busy to date, he's got Ethan and, well, his doodles." Or, Some people are meant to be parents, some are meant to be single, and some are meant to be both. Passive-aggressive crap. She enjoyed playing the game in which she said I was somehow less mature because I hadn't remarried or paraded someone new around. And usually I didn't mind, but this time I had a card to play. I started talking to Samantha around a month ago. We connected through an online art community. She was a graphic artist situated in another city, with a wicked sense of humor and a calm intensity that reminded me of myself. We had only gone on 4 dates, but we clicked. She was not flamboyant. She didn't need to be the focus of attention, yet she captivated me. So I phoned her. "This might sound insane," I remarked, "but would you be willing to come to a family dinner with me this Friday?" "Dinner?" she said, doubtful. "At a restaurant where my sister once exiled me and my son to the sidelines." A pause. "Now I'm interested. I totally understand if it's too soon or too weird, but I'll go," she told me. Just like that. Step 2. Dress the role. I do not mean fancy. Megan anticipated something special. She lived for aesthetics. I wanted something crisper, more subtle, more confident. I found a fitted blue jacket that I hadn't worn in years. I paired it with a clean white shirt, dark jeans, and boots that didn't scream trying too hard, but yet made a statement. Ethan donned a new charcoal button-down with chinos. Samantha, of course, looked effortlessly lovely in a rich burgundy gown that made Megan's pink clothing appear like wallpaper. Step 3. Control the story before she can. Megan lived on surprises. She enjoyed how people were taken off guard and rushing to react. That is how she maintained her power, by setting the pace. So I flipped it. On the morning of the meal, I uploaded a photo on my Instagram art account. It wasn't anything showy, just a snapshot of Ethan and me drawing at the park with the statement, "1 year ago, I was stuck in a place that drained me. Tonight, I celebrate not just my birthday, but the quiet wins that saved my life and the people who made it worth rebuilding." It exploded more than I imagined. A handful of my paintings had gone semi-viral in the previous month, and I suppose many had been hoping for a peek behind the curtain. Comments came in, offering support, encouragement, and cheering me on. Megan follows me on Instagram. I knew she had seen it. She loved the post within an hour but did not reply, which, in her language, was more powerful than an insult. Step 4. Arrive last. She always liked to make a great entrance. This time, I gave her the spotlight. Let her bask in it. I even contacted Steve ahead of time and requested, "If we arrive a few minutes late, can you make sure there's someone to walk us in personally?" He chuckled. "You got it." So we did. Ethan, Samantha, and I arrived exactly 9 minutes late. A well-dressed hostess greeted us and escorted us down the familiar corridor. I could immediately hear the conversation in the private dining area. Megan's voice was too loud with laughing. John interjects with one of his dull tales. My mother had questions that no one was answering. When the door opened, everything came to a standstill. Every head turned. Megan froze in mid-sentence. Her gaze moved between me, Samantha, and Ethan. Then she grinned. Too tight and too quickly. "Oh, Daniel," she responded. "You're here. We were starting to worry. I messaged you." "We were on our way," I murmured easily, resting my hand on Samantha's back as we entered. Traffic was a nightmare. She gave Samantha a wavering grin. "This is Samantha," I said. "A good friend. She's a designer." Samantha offered her hand cordially. "Thanks for having me." Megan snatched it, then dropped it a little too hastily. "Well, we hadn't planned for, plus ones." "Good thing the reservation was for 12, I remarked, staring at the table. And there were 12 beautiful seats. Except for 4, all are occupied. She had no way out. We sat between Samantha and I. My mother stood opposite us, looking little shocked. John lifted his glass in a half-hearted toast, mentioning that the birthday boy had finally arrived. Megan attempted to recuperate. She directed the conversation toward neutral subjects. She discussed a business trip John had done. She described the twins' current extracurricular activities. She even included a passive-aggressive joke. We all thought Daniel was keeping us in suspense. Classic artistic temperament, right? I grinned. I like to make an entrance. Guess it runs in the family. John chuckled. My mother gazed down at her menu, but the tension was palpable. Samantha handled herself like a professional. She posed meaningful inquiries. She complimented the twins' activities. She laughed at the proper moments. She did not overshare, fawn, or attempt to prove anything. Samantha wasn't trying to win, which bothered Megan more than bringing a spotlight and a marching band would have. She was simply there, relaxed and confident, and it disrupted Megan's entire performance. She was already in a downward spiral by the time the appetizers came. "You know?" she said abruptly, drinking her wine. "Daniel's always been the mysterious one. The artist. The free spirit. We never know what he's working on, do we?" I set down my fork. "Actually, I've been working on a children's book, illustrations and all. Got picked up by a publisher last month." A quiet descended across the table. My mom's eyes widened. "Really?" I nodded. "Yeah. It's about a kid who finds strength in being different, inspired by Ethan." Samantha leaned over and softly squeezed my hand. "That's amazing," my mother responded really. Megan recovered quickly. "Well, isn't that sweet," she said, her smile too big. "Daniel always had a vivid imagination. Good thing he's finally putting it to use." Ethan, God bless him, spoke out just then. He also has over 35 commissions now, and his art was featured in an online magazine. I didn't tell him to say that. I didn't know he remembered, but the pride in his words moved me. Megan blinked. "Well, I guess we've all been busy lately." I grinned. Some of us more than others. With that, the equilibrium changed. The tables had turned. Not via screaming, not through show, but through presence and proof. I was no longer a supporting role in Megan's well-maintained family story. I rewrote the script. And yet, I wasn't finished since dessert hadn't arrived, nor had the main surprise. The clink of forks, murmurs of uncomfortable compliments, and the odd forced laugh filled the room like background noise. By the time dessert arrived, Megan's theatrical warmth had hardened into something colder. She still smiled politely and cocked her head in interest while others talked, but her gaze remained fixed on me, observing, calculating, waiting for a blunder on which she might capitalize. I did not give her one. I hadn't spoken anything since dropping the children's book bomb. Not because I didn't have anything more to say, but because the stillness was louder. My absence from the typical family conversation disturbed her. Megan flourished while handling the script. But now I was not feeding her lines. I was not going to give her a foil. I was simply sitting calm, present, and unconcerned, and it was driving her crazy. Megan perked up when the server presented the dessert menu, her opportunity to retake the situation. "Should we do a shared dessert again?" she questioned the table, "like we did at the twins' birthday." My mother nodded graciously. John gave a non-committal shrug. The twins, who were half asleep at this point, didn't care. Megan stared at me. "What do you think, Daniel?" I drank my coffee and met her eyes. "Actually, I already arranged something." She blinked. "You did?" "I spoke with Steve last week. He's got something special lined up." Before she could react, the lights dimmed slightly, just enough to quiet the place down. Then it rolled in. A cart carried by 2 waiters and accompanied by a third carrying a tray of sparkling glasses. The cart included a big stacked dessert. Not a carbon replica of the one at the twins' party, but a perfected development. This one was exquisite and sculptural, with a tower of white chocolate mousse, caramel-drizzled profiteroles, and dark chocolate shards that span out like wings. The gold-dusted raspberries glistened in the candlelight. On the top tier, a thin slate of tempered chocolate embossed with white script. "To Daniel for rising quietly, but powerfully." The visitors let out gasps and hushed wows. Even John leaned in to get a better look. Ethan's eyes widened. Samantha grinned. "Megan?" She froze. I stood. "Thank you," I told the waiters before turning to face the table. "I hope you don't mind. I just wanted to mark this moment." Megan discovered her voice. "That's quite a gesture." I grinned. "It is." She offered a little laugh. "I mean, it's lovely, but don't you think it's a bit much? This was supposed to be a shared dinner, not just your celebration." There it was. The fracture and simmer underneath the surface. I nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. But for the past decade, every family dinner has been about someone else. Someone's promotion, someone's kid's recital, someone's curated perfection. And I've always sat quietly congratulating everyone, applauding the show, trying not to take up space." She opened her lips, but I continued. "This time, I wanted to try something different. Not out of spite, just to remind myself that I'm allowed to be seen. A pause to remind Ethan that being kind doesn't mean being invisible." Megan's cheeks twisted as she considered whether to double down or back off. I did not give her the chance. "Oh, and one more thing," I said, putting down my coffee. I went inside my jacket pocket and took out a folded envelope. I wasn't planning to bring this up today, but since we were all present, I passed the envelope across the table to my mother. She took it carefully. "What's this?" A letter from Dad's lawyer, I answered calmly, referring to the trust fund. Megan paled. What? What are you talking about? My mother opened the envelope and started reading. Her eyes expanded. You see, I said calmly. Before Dad passed, he set up a trust, one for each of us, but the language was a bit particular. The terms were conditional. Megan was frozen. Mom, he saw how things were going, the dynamics, the favoritism, the silences, and he wanted to correct that. My mother gazed up at me, shocked. He left you a controlling interest, I told him. In the family cabin, the one Megan's been renting out as an Airbnb for the past 2 summers. John abruptly sat up taller. Wait, what? I turned to face him. Yeah, the deed's been in a trust this whole time. Megan's name is on the usage lease, but not the ownership. I returned my gaze to my sister, and the condition states that if any beneficiary engages in exclusionary conduct against another, particularly regarding their kid, the trust may be reorganized. Megan's voice crackled. You're bluffing. Check with the lawyer, I said. His number's on the back page. She took the envelope from my mother and scanned the papers like a drowning woman searching for a rope. John peered over her shoulder. Is this real? Megan didn't respond. I stood again. I don't want the cabin, Megan. I don't want your parties or your spotlight. But I will protect what's mine, and I won't let my son be treated like a second-class citizen in his own family. Nobody spoke. The only sound came from a fork landing on a dish. I exhaled. So, here's the deal. I'm going to assume control of the cabin lease starting next month. You can remove it from your Airbnb listings. I've already spoken with the management company, and I've decided Ethan and I will spend a few weeks there this summer. Just the 2 of us. No drama, no performance. Megan looked like she had swallowed glass. And going forward, I went on, I'll decide when and if we attend family gatherings. If I'm invited, I'll assume it's sincere. If not, I'm okay with that too. I turned to my mother. No hard feelings, but I won't keep showing up to be someone's backdrop. She gave a hesitant nod, tears in her eyes. Perhaps guilt. Maybe something more, but she didn't say anything. Samantha stood alongside me and placed a hand on my back. Ethan stared up at me with astonishment. For the first time all night, I grinned sincerely. Thanks for dinner. We stepped out as dessert was served, and the door closed behind us. I could still hear the hush echoing in that exquisite small dining room. That was the last family meal I'd attended in a long time. However, that was the first night I actually felt free. Not only from Megan, but from the pressure to explain, prove and perform. I didn't need their approval anymore since I had created something greater. I had constructed myself, and I had showed my kid that quiet people do not stay quiet forever.